In early 2019, GSK started a test and learn incubator initiative that outlined 4 areas of curiosity. These included the exciting and fast developing areas of artificial intelligence and voice. This initiative's remit was to investigate how these technologies were currently used and perceived by consumers, to provide foundational level insights that could be taken forward into GSK's future innovation and digital strategy. In March that same year, our first initiative was to assess an AI self-care coach that you could interact with in a real retail healthcare environment. This AI coach was still very much in beta, but essentially is an avatar that you can ask a series of questions to and receive advice from on a variety of healthcare needs. However, before even considering progressing and developing this life-changing technology, GSK needed further insights to understand how shoppers would react to the avatar, which categories and situations were most appropriate, and the potential impact on GSK's future retail strategy.
So from a research perspective, it sounds simple enough, right? Introduce a future-facing concept, check appeal, interest, fit with different categories, and optimize for the best performance. But on further consideration and debate with my GSK partner, Lithia, we agreed there was a real challenge to meet here in creating a method that could go beyond that rational consideration while still exploring top-of-mind thought, as you might expect to find in a retail environment. And when it comes to voice and virtual assistants, the media has portrayed that we're all relatively comfortable with asking it to play our favorite song or check the weather. And thanks to the like of Siri, Alexa, Google, Bixby and Cortana, all the gang, it's maybe not a question of will people engage with this technology, but how will they begin to realize its full potential? But this isn't just about education. The technology just isn't quite there yet. Voice assistants are still very prone to error, inadvertently ordering items that we don't want, completely misunderstanding our questions, and creating embarrassing, potentially childhood scarring situations, which we've definitely encountered firsthand in the Haslam household.
You might ask, then why do we do this, right? The truth of the matter is that promise of a future where your devices could be changing your life for the better is really hard to resist. It's very appealing. But if you add to this rising healthcare costs and the easier and more convoluted way in which people diagnose themselves using Dr. Google or internet, and the increasing and confusing variety of products that you can find in a store, makes us want to get to the bottom of this more. The question remains, is there room for an assistant that can be both human and also have personalization that help overcome these fears? Well, that's what we're going to find out.
So to try and understand this in a healthcare setting, we designed a tailored approach using a variety of different methodologies, challenging ourselves to recheck our findings at every stage of the journey. The first stage was a perception test where we engaged with our always-on digital community to get foundational level understanding. The second stage was a reaction test where we used in-home video ethnography to observe reactions to our avatar as people saw it for the first time. And finally, a real-life experience test, bringing shoppers into this state-of-the-art GSK Shopper Science Lab to run a series of experiments.
So at this stage, we engaged with a group of shoppers that had different levels of experience and exposure to AI and voice. We talked to people that were very savvy, used to it, to those that were really challenged with the technology. And we didn't want to size the market per se, we just wanted to identify who this was most appealing to. And we wanted to explore current perceptions, current attitudes, evaluate the willingness to interact with something like this, rationalize, right? Not in the moment because we're in a preliminary stage, and then get a better sense of likelihood to engage if they come across this in a retail environment. The results were really encouraging at first. Regardless of experience with technology, AI, or voice, convenience was really king. Being able to conduct tasks without having to move. You know, we love our convenience. Yet the frustrations that existed when it didn't work effectively were huge, right? For instance, inaccurate responses that they were expecting to get from a service like this and receiving the wrong information. They were adding a seed of doubt to stop people from doing anything beyond simple tasks, like play this music. They did not want to interact further than that. So what really became less encouraging at this stage is that discovering or finding out more about your healthcare was not on the top of their list for items that they would look for in AI or voice. This highlights the lack of trust that people currently have for voice assistants to really return the right information. So we presented this idea of this AI healthcare coach as a demo. Our participants agreed that they would only feel comfortable using it on their own because they will be less likely to use it in a public setting. Imagine that you're talking about your gas problems in the middle of a store. Not too good. So mainly due to the embarrassment of speaking about those issues and those problems became a concern over their privacy and their details that people could overhear. We presented different options of what the avatar should look like. For instance, male, female, cartoony, and almost real life. Whilst initial reactions to all of them were fairly balanced between the cartoon and the real life character, when we asked, okay, how about in the healthcare setting? The female-like interpretation was preferred overall. This seems to connect with the need of trusting the avatar with health questions, since real people are perceived to convey expertise better than cartoon style, which were perceived as gimmicky.
Now at this point, our takeaways could have been encompassed in 2 key learnings. 1, people are primed and curious about this new technology, and they will therefore engage with it if you put it in front of them, but only if it's not too personal and it can be conducted in private. Number 2, if you can overcome these barriers identified and proceed with an avatar, make it as human-like as you possibly can to elicit trust and expertise. From the previous stage, we had a really clear set of objectives to explore with our willing participants. Number 1, gain unfiltered, top-of-mind reaction to a working demonstration of the avatar to see if that reality was more reachable than the initial wireframe concept. And number 2, explore different scenarios ranging from functional to more personal and private interactions to assess their levels of comfortability, also introducing that human-like avatar to see if it led to a more natural and trusted encounter. As we saw in stage 1, the level of curiosity was there, but much stronger and emotive, being seen as a truly unique encounter not experienced before, as if they were trying to figure out exactly what it was doing and surprised by just how interactive it could be. However, this curiosity was replaced by an uneasy feeling, almost a negative reaction to the avatar itself, in the way it was speaking and interacting with the shopper in our video demonstration. And it's here that we discovered the use of a human-like avatar does create some issues not yet experienced by the likes of Siri, Alexa, Google, and the rest of the gang, demonstrating that there may be a reason why these assistants don't have a face yet.
So I would be willing to probably, in some cases, more comfortable talking to a robot about something personal than if I had to go and talk to a real person.
For sure.
Or just somebody in the Walgreens aisle, if I was asking for something that I might be a little embarrassed about.
Sure.
I might be more likely to prefer the kiosk.
I would want it private, so I would want it in my home or in a doctor private setting. I wouldn't really want it in a drugstore per se, because now you got to tell anybody who's in earshot all of your symptoms and issues. It would be, to me, an invasion of privacy.
The most likely explanation we found is something called the Uncanny Valley. This is not a new concept. This was conceived probably 50 or so years ago by Masahiro Mori's. Description is basically that the Uncanny Valley represents your reaction to more human-like versus more cartoony or artificial beings. So the closer that these beings are to look more human, the more rejected they will be by people. To illustrate this, let me put you in context. Think Frozen. The exaggeration of the features make it look relatable, looks like human, but not quite. But also now think about films like Polar Express, where the characters are so realistic that almost kind of kicks up that creep factor that we all have. The creepometer goes all the way up. So when we play with characters like that, we don't want to generate that effect. We want it to be relatable so that they can interact with them.
Now further along with our research learnings, our takeaways at this stage could have been described in the following way. Curiosity is still there, but accompanied by surprise at how it works in practice, highlighting the possibility of misunderstanding and distance from expectation that could exist in a real-life shopper setting. Number 2, making the avatar as human-like as possible is a much more complex interaction and equation that can trigger a negative response or emotion, which isn't going to help gain trust and credibility, which is so important within a healthcare setting. Ultimately, we were still seeing in stage 2, it's a very difficult concept for most people to understand how it will work in practice, and the value it will bring above and beyond the current way they interact at shelf, and potentially with real people. But not discouraged by this at all, we were really enthused to move quickly and observe shoppers in a real-life setting to see them within this healthcare context and an environment that could potentially help alleviate these issues and concerns and allow us to retest some of these considerations and the hypotheses that we had. As a rationalised concept, we knew from our previous stages of research that shoppers found the idea of this AI and avatar appealing, but could only see themselves performing simple tasks and were less likely to interact on a more personal or embarrassing level. But that's why we wanted to bring people into our GSK Shopper Science Lab.
When setting up the lab for these experiments, we encountered our first issues in trying to decide where to place the AI avatar in store. This included figuring out the best types of displays to use, adjusting the lighting to prevent glare on the screens, and adjusting the volume of the potential music or store noise in the background. Our goal was to determine the best way to bring shopper attention to the avatar simulating this experience in the retail environment. Once we were satisfied where we landed, we brought the shoppers into the space.
Where's Waldo? We brought our shoppers to our Shopper Science Lab and placed this avatar in 3 different locations. 2 of them were main aisles of our OTC category, and the other one was the pharmacy. Our hope, our expectation was that they would notice it in any of these locations at all, but no. Remarkably, none of them noticed it spontaneously. We had to probe that you see it. But this comes to prove that we really need to do a good job in priming and guiding and almost nudging them, because we are in competition with a lot of things that are happening in the store. We have big aisles, we have displays, and all sorts of activations that we're competing with, especially because this is a new technology that they're playing with. There's this playful curiosity, and you hear that concept coming up a lot today, when it comes to interacting with technology. So we also witnessed that there's a very rationalized perspective about the limits that this type of technology could offer. So what we witnessed to some extent is in our shopper missions, they started seeing this as a cool thing. Then we had a couple of people shopping. When the first person engaged with the technology, the second person felt like, I want to know what that's all about. So it created almost like a no-see experience in this humanish persona that really became very compelling to our shoppers.
So is the shelf the right place? We debated this extensively, and this is the reason that we placed the avatar in several different locations as part of our experiment. Besides the issue of privacy and sharing personal details in a public space, we also knew that when placed within a certain aisle or fixture, shoppers assumed it was anchored to that specific category, and there was a further assumption that its reach or its recommendations would be limited just within the scope and the context of where it lived, and not necessarily the whole healthcare category. In this instance, the avatar shifts from being a Siri of the store to a Siri of the shelf. So when asked to hypothetically consider what level of personalization this avatar could deliver, most people were actually quite open to a future where it could recognize who you are, and that would in turn enhance their experience on future visits. But we know the reality of asking people to give up their personal information in order to create that kind of experience is not an easy issue to overcome.
In this final stage, we had really good takeaways that moved from stage to stage in a significant way. The first one is curiosity really evolves and makes it cool and cooler when properly executed on the shelf, reducing those privacy concerns or potential embarrassments that you could face at interacting. The reality is much less invasive than the expectation. The second big takeaway is that it's hard to find, easily ignored, and it really needs a lot of priming, especially for new technology. Messaging has to be very clear. And please remember, there's a lot of competition in the store environment. It is important to know exactly where this would live, what surrounds it, from the noise in the store to the actual execution. So all those details need to be considered as we launch something like this. And any technology at shelf must be simple. One thing we learned with this project is that it has to be low effort for the people we serve and also solve a shopper problem. So in reality, this project was never about give me a go, no go decision. It was more to generate foundational learnings. And the avatar was just really cool manifestation of what a game-changing technology execution could do in the omni-channel perspective.
All in all, this project was a really effective way to uncover the opportunities and challenges that any implementation of technology faces in this environment today, and offer guidance for future digital initiatives of this type. This should act as a reminder that sometimes you need to take something like a simple brief, in this case a concept test, with a more critical eye, a creative spirit, and a trusting client partner curious to see how different decision making can play out in different contexts of what people say, where they are, and how they answer your questions.